Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Stierle. And, Bill, last time we set up that we would talk about sort of a continuation or sort of the next step in the worst case scenario, which is what happens after Election Day or between Election Day and January 20th, 2021, depending on who wins. Like, what's the worst thing that would happen if Biden wins? What's the worst thing that could happen if Trump wins? And I think there is a lot of concern out there among people about this. I'm seeing it. I'm hearing it from people I talk to on both sides. This sort of speculation of what's going to happen if one or the other wins.
Sure.
And so I think it'd be good to talk through that and figure out what it might be. What might be the worst case scenario?
Well, the thing that's nice about this discussion, Tom, is that this is right in my wheelhouse for things that I get called in to do in my professional life, which is there is this mayor or police chief that has this city, and during the city council meeting, they have constituents that come in and they're really angry because there's an important vote and it doesn't go your way. And then the constituents are walking out angry, but they're not using great language. So the constituents come back and they become angry again. So what I do is I actually plan for these things so that I know not only what and brainstorm what the person is going to say or do, and what is the worst case situation of what they're going to deliver next. And not how I'm just going to respond logistically, because a lot of times the police know how to respond logistically. They don't know how to respond language-wise. They don't know what to say or do next. So even though the election is going to teach us something about how divided we are as a nation and how polarized we are, it'll teach us something about the numbers of people on both sides. What it will not do is it will not teach us the path of restoration. It won't, because there's no preparation for restoration, but there's certainly not the language of restoration at the moment. There's the language of being adversarial. If Joe Biden gets elected, you're going to lose your suburbs. Wait a minute, I saved your suburbs for you. It's like, and he has evidence for that. He, set it up so that housing can't be integrated. Government money can't put in housing in certain neighborhoods, blah, blah, blah. And he's calling, I saved your suburbs. And there's like this little, thing of truth to it that, well, yeah, but all you did was just divide us even further, and you're kicking it down the road that somebody else has to make the hard adult decision later about how do you get a democratic nation to collaborate and cooperate together when you have people that don't see each other and don't interact with each other, so they don't know, how the separation is going to be. So that's a big part. So the main thing is to have a deeper conversation, because, whether or not we're a nation of peace and fight for that, or a nation of war and fight for that. We've got to really have a deeper conversation. So, with all that said, preparation is going to be the key. So, what do you think might be the worst thing that Trump might say? One sentence, or we'll just brainstorm about this because this is where the rubber meets the road. Okay. So, think of a sentence. He says what, and then I'll give a response to that sentence.
Well, especially if Trump loses. Obviously, this is the scenario, right? What
Sure.
would Trump say if he loses? What would Biden say if he loses? And if Trump loses, I mean, the concern is he's going to play up his greatest hits of the election was rigged. And he's not, and it's not only what he's going to say,
Okay, so
but
let's pause.
All right,
Yeah,
we'll pause there.
Let's pause there. The election is rigged. And for all those people listening to the audio, I'm using a hand puppet, right? A hand gesture as a puppet right now.
I'm going to actually send you some sock puppets. I think you need real puppets when you do this.
So the election was rigged. So you got to have a sentence to say back to it other than no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't is not an effective sentence. But here's the effective response sentence. So, Mr. President, you feel doubtful about fairness, and you want to make sure that there is fairness that takes place in the election. Yes. What has happened there in that language response is I've just made the president accountable. You want to make sure that fairness takes place. Is that correct? He just agreed to making fairness take place. Mr. President, what are the steps are you taking to meet the need for fairness in the election? What steps did you take to make sure that fairness took place? Huh?
Yeah, I mean, his nature is just to fall back on uncertainty and say, "Well, I don't know. We're looking at it. We've got people looking at it. We'll see what happens."
So you feel doubtful and skeptical. You got to call them out on doubtful, skeptical. You feel doubtful and skeptical that your people will be able to find out how to make the election fair, and you would like them to research and come up with a plan to make things fair. Is that correct?
Yes.
Notice how you're stepping into it, but yes, but he's not taking the action to meet the need. He's just complaining about the idea of fairness not taking place.
Sure, but who's going to be there, Bill, to say this to the president? It's left up to who? The White House press corps? I mean, who would actually step up and do that?
Right. The press corps has got to go up. Republicans can have really good talking points here. If they'd like to get back into the game, they can have some great talking points here.
That's a good
Republicans can say things in very safe way. Hey, the president is really complaining about fairness, and I really want fairness too as a Republican. And gosh, it'll be interesting to see. So they start their off ramp, because then they get to say after the election, yeah, there was some research done and there was fairness in that place. And I was able to check into it and there was fairness. I was able to check in because there was no evidence of anything having to do with fairness that wasn't met. See, they need their off ramp, and they need to have the deeper conversation with themselves and be ready for a deeper, empathetic, compassionate, and powerful statement to take place to deal with the language of marketing and sales, because no one is beating him in marketing sales at all. Still, his rallies are still working. He's still selling the same stuff.
Yeah, he is, for sure.
It's all sizzle. There's no steak. Those poor people. I mean, I'm saying poor
oh my
people,
gosh.
but
And it came out.
They don't know what's coming in their direction. They have no idea.
Yeah, because they're still being sold this situation that they really believe that he's their savior and he's going to win. I mean, they haven't even considered what happens if he doesn't win. There's going to be a lot of very angry people who are his base, who are showing up to the rallies that he's still doing in the midst of another COVID surge. So it's, there's going to be a lot of people who are very unhappy no matter who wins. But I think that's part of the worst case scenario is people are wondering what people are going to do when Trump loses. And if he doesn't accept the results, if he's going to fight it if there are states that are close and there's maybe a legal basis to say, hey, where all the votes counted, was it done properly? But at some point, I think the worst case scenario, Bill, is not what Trump might say, but what Trump will really have a very hard time saying. And I don't think it's in his nature. What you remember in 2000, after the Supreme Court ruled, what did Al Gore do? He went on television and he said, while I disagree with the Supreme Court's decision, I disagree with what's happened here, I accept it. He gave an address to the nation and he said he accepts the results of the election. My worst case scenario is Trump doesn't have the maturity and the thought to put America first to actually do that and concede.
Well, then that's a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
He says the sentence, I don't concede until every vote is counted. And that's the way a bankruptcy hearing is held, by the way, Tom. It's long, it's slow, it's drawn out. Everybody's scrapping for a percentage of the dollar they've lost. It's in the courts. It takes forever, year, 2, 3. So he's been here before about losing. He's lost many times. The thing that he does, though, is he runs out the clock by positioning anything between a no response to an adversarial response. And what that buys him is it buys him people getting exhausted and just paying to get him to go away so that they can close it. They go like, I am too rich to care. This is an investor, let's say in a casino. I'm just making up a sentence right now. I am too rich to care if I'm only going to get 50 cents on a dollar or if I'm going to get 25 cents in the dollar. I want peace, and peace looks like I'll take 25 cents a dollar just so I can get this whole situation behind me. Because quite frankly, he's a bad investment. It's a bad investment. I got sold on this. I'm ready to cut my losses. And that's what large wealth allows you to do, is go like, oh, I'm only going to, well, it could have been a lot worse. I'm only going to get 75 cents. Well, I'm going to get 25 cents. Okay. At least I'm not getting a penny with every dollar I lost here. And they're walking out of the thing going like, yeah, it took 2 years, but at least I got. This kind of psychology, though, with a voter is very different than the psychology of a investor. The investor can cut and run. The voter can't. They did their vote and they're stuck with the loss square, in their, dining room table during Thanksgiving, where no one is going to talk about anything political this Thanksgiving. Otherwise, the whole thing will go south. But see, it's not people are going to walk on eggshells. What winds up happening is that there's not the healthy conversation about the disappointment or the healthy conversation about the values that are necessary. All the people are talking about is the division. They're not talking about the restoration. So it is disheartening because the nation divided needs to become indivisible. The Trump voter, if he loses, has to come to some form of reconciliation about the loss of their vote. The Republicans that's backed him have to come to some resolution. And the president, whether or not he comes to resolution, is not important. What's important is our psychology in dealing with him. Got it?
Got it. Okay.
That's where it's got to stick. As a nation, and as we move into this, is if he loses. If he wins, then the other side has to go through that scenario, and that's preparation for what am I going to say worst case scenario. What is going to say when Trump wins? How do you be a good loser when the person that, they're not, he's not shaking hands with Joe Biden.
No. And, it's interesting. I think we got a glimpse of what that might look like at the town hall interview when Joe Biden was on with George Stephanopoulos the same night that Trump was on with Savannah Guthrie. That was supposed to be the second debate. It never happened. And Stephanopoulos asked Joe Biden, what will it say about you if you lose this election? And he says, well, it might say I'm not a very good candidate. That was sort of the probably off the top of his head little thing where it's personal. But then he reflected and he said something really, I thought, powerful, which basically he said, well, what I hope it does not mean, instead of answering the question, what would it mean if you lose? He said, well, what I hope it does not mean, this was pretty astute, I thought. What I hope it does not mean is that we're actually and I'm paraphrasing here, as divided a nation as Trump would have us believe we are. There was a couple more things he put in there, but essentially that was the message. I hope it doesn't mean that America essentially is as bad off as Trump would have us believe we are. And that was, I thought that was well said, but it doesn't leave us in a happy, rosy scenario going forward of restoration. It kind of leaves us in this pit of despair.
It does. It does. It's not, it's what it does mean is that Americans can be promised things, and I'm going to be Joe Biden for a second. What it does mean is that Americans can be sold things, the promise of things, and are left with the emptiness of not having that thing delivered that they've been promised. And that Americans have gotten used to promises being made that have not been fulfilled. And that's more what it means, that it's that there is, that we're not as rigorous as we are in our citizenship. That's what it means. See, it's, we're not paying attention to, is this person getting something done? We're just paying attention. How does this person make me feel either scared or confident? Scared or confident. See, that's what each one of those marketing and sales sentences that that Trump gives is, I am going to scare you, and then I'm going to make you feel confident. I saved the suburbs. Aren't you glad that I saved the suburbs? You're like the suburbs weren't under threat. How, they're going like, yeah, you saved the suburbs. It's like, there was no suburb. There's nothing going. It's like, it's the disconnection that the listener, that the follower is not really quite fully paying attention to, because they're caught with the enthusiasm of a unreal fallacy or bias presented to them, and then they're agreeing to it, and they're just allowing their emotions to just go along for the ride. Oh yes, they were going to put a housing project in my backyard. There says, no, they were just trying to create some fair housing on the inner city. I mean, that's what it was looking for, something to get the homeless people off the street, to start a transition to somebody to care for themselves and make it a little bit more affordable so they can, work at a low wage and still be able to afford housing. It's it's a little upsetting, but it's really more in alignment with what's actually happening.
So, Bill, do you see, and I know we didn't talk about this, and maybe this is premature, maybe it's a discussion for a whole other episode coming up later in December or early January, but if Trump loses the election and eventually accepts the reality, which it probably will be the Republicans that are still in power in the Senate and, and maybe in the House that help sort of nudge him off his own off ramp, right, and get him there, and with their language and how they talk about it. But do you see this president, Donald Trump, actually attending the inauguration of Joe Biden in that display of peaceful transition of power?
Only if there's a benefit for him to be there.
Because I don't think it's ever happened before that a president like Jimmy Carter on his way out, like George Herbert Walker Bush on his way out, was not at the inauguration of the president that beat them in the election.
His brand, a part of his brand, is the conflict fighter, and the one that gets to be known as the person. He'll get a better media uptick if he doesn't show, because they'll cover that he's not showing. Can you imagine if they just don't cover that he doesn't show?
No, can't imagine that.
So the challenge is that he's going to steal the recognition and the respect and the acknowledgement away from Joe Biden at the end, and the media is just going to take the bait. That's the problem with a needs-based narrative, is what the good reason why they do it, and the answer is that they can say it in passing and go like, well, I'm going to pretend I'm the media. Watch this to get unsettled. Any of you media people listening out there, stick it into your crawl, your read list. It'll sound like this. Former President Trump has chosen not to attend to meet his need for respect and recognition, that his need for fairness wasn't met, or his need for respect is being met, and he's looking to make a statement. In this moment, we're respecting Joe Biden and his willingness to stand up and take the mantle for our nation and our leadership. So the pivot has got to be clean, that the recognition and acknowledgement, we're going to give him a sentence or two of recognition and acknowledgement on the way out, but not allow the energy to take away from Joe Biden, because that's really what has been happening, or what happens with a strong mindset of marketing and sales. They can't get off I'm going to say it, crack cocaine of being seen, the crack cocaine of being heard. I mean, it's a label, it's a diagnosis, but I want the listener to really hear how important a need is when it hasn't been met in our childhood, while we're growing up, in our adulthood. That respect and recognition is something you wield, and good branding really is about that. Do you respect Coca-Cola? Do you respect Pepsi? The 4 soda brands there are. I mean, there's 4 soda brands, and you respect every one of those brands because they're solid, they're stable. Nobody's taken on the giant. No one's trying to launch a new soda company. Same as Trump. No one's going to take me on because I'm big. I have this brand. This brand is unshakable. But I mean, we'll see how that goes in the next year, see how shakeable the brand is,
Well,
but we'll see.
well, we're talking probably a little bit more about what happens if Trump loses than if Trump wins. So, what do you
Okay, you
think
want
the
to pivot
worst
to
case
that? Sure.
scenario is? I mean, we only barely touched on it. What I think in the interest of a communication show, we need to try to give a little equal
Oh, I'll be
time,
glad to do that.
even
Sure,
if,
sure.
even if I don't know. I mean, honestly, I have this question mark in my head. What is the worst case scenario for, if Trump wins with what Biden could say or do? I mean, I guess I don't see him really doing that, but that's why I have
No,
trouble with it.
I think what's the worst case scenario is that people will protest, they will make their voice heard, they'll be the loyal opposition, but the opposition will be more resistant. It won't be as cooperative. The worst thing that's going to happen to the nation is the left becomes less cooperative and willing to agree. They'll start fighting battles where they need to fight battles in the state legislatures, and they'll go down the list so that they're making change, because there's only certain things that can happen at the national level, and the state level is really where a lot of the work is done regarding change. If you want to get change to take place, you do it at the state level with the governors and things like that. And then all the state is standing there going like, oh yeah, the federal government make me do it. And the federal government goes, uh-oh, I can't make you do it. I mean, that's kind of what's happening in Michigan. It's like, the Whitmer's going like, yeah, make me not do it. And Trump's going, oh yeah, I'm going to make you do it. I'm going to do that. It's like, you're fighting that battle, and she's taking some punches, but she's learning how to swing back now.
Wasn't that
So
interesting? As you're saying that, Bill, it occurred to me that maybe the worst case scenario if Trump wins doesn't come from Biden. The
yeah,
worst case scenario if Trump wins comes from Trump, in
yeah,
that he's not, I mean, he hasn't done it so far. Why do we think he's going to try to unite this nation and bring the
no,
two sides together? He's going to continue
no.
to further divide us.
That's right. That's right. And the division will be, as time goes by, there's a certain moment in the time where there's a disdain for the bad boys of the group, and then the bad boys eventually go away. It's sort of like, you know, um, who are the bad boys? In the NFL, it used to be like the Raiders. The Raiders were the bad boys, and then everybody's called the bad boys. But right now, they're the Las Vegas Raiders, and their bad boy image of, cheap shots and the way they used to do it. And I'm thinking about the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s of the Raiders. I'm going like, oh my God, clotheslining guys, and they get a penalty, and intimidation and stuff like that. It's not, they're not, that's not a part of their brand, because that brand tarnishes pretty good. I mean, you still get the folks that are interested in the mystique of that brand, but really the front office is going like, yeah, we have that sort of brand over here, but really we're running a clean ship over here, and it's a pirate ship, but it's it's a clean one. So that, yeah, the worst case scenario on Trump's side is that if Biden loses, is that the certain groups of people have been mobilizing for over these things. They'll start realizing, okay, how can I fight with this? How can I gain civic thing? And there's literally going to be more and more of a grassroots swinging back to that. And that's what the Republicans did when they, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, they grassrooted it. They started working their magic at the local level, and they started capturing the hearts, minds, and souls, and getting districting to go their way, and start winning the battles, the small battles, to go the way they needed to. And yeah, it's a way politics works. You've got to get the person to vote for you,
Well,
whether it's what you're offering them is true or not. So
The interesting thing is things have, in terms of a campaign, okay, all the campaign in the last month or more has not been going well for Trump. Clearly, I mean, he hasn't been able to get the messaging across he wanted because he got coronavirus. And then, a lot of things have happened in the polls, if you believe the polls. And actually, there have been a lot of good articles that said, the polls are actually a lot more accurate than people think they are, and they even weren't all that inaccurate back in 2016 either. Anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. But the point is that things have not been going well for Trump in recent weeks in the election. And there are Republican senators who are not up for reelection that are starting to distance themselves from the president. Even candidates that are vulnerable, Republican Senate candidates running for reelection this year, are now fearful that them being tied so closely to Trump is hurting them in their home districts. And
right.
so you've got a lot of Republicans starting to speak out. And one of the most notable ones was Republican Ben Sasse from, Nebraska, in a leaked town hall recording with his constituents, was, talking very negatively about Trump, saying Republicans are preparing for a bloodbath in here at this election.
Yeah.
And they're, so the interesting thing is that I think that there's a very realistic chance that Republicans like Ben Sasse and others that are left behind to deal with the wake of Trump, the rough seas or whatever you want to call it metaphorically, that they're going to be the adults in the room that try to give the president an off ramp, help push him into the sunset, to accept the election and all that. But what's more interesting to me is, what do those people do if Trump actually wins? Do they suddenly reverse course and now they're going to be supportive of the president again? I mean, because the things that some of them are saying right now are pretty hard to come back from.
Yeah, there's going to be some trouble, because I mean, a lot of the primary values that used to be underneath the large R Republican, fiscal conservative, standing for a constitution, certain values, rule of law, all of those different things, their promises become more and more hollow, and it gives an opportunity for Democrats to kind of step in and pull some of those values back onto their side, and then what happens is the Republicans say, well, you didn't do those values. The Democrats can always say they promised those values, but they didn't do those values, so your vote wasn't really well spent last time. So that's just the common political way to talk about it. But the deeper conversation is, what does justice look like? What does fairness look like? What does equality look like? See, immediately our conversation just got deeper really quick, and all I did was put 4 words in the root. What does equanimity look like? How do we create fairness on Wall Street and also create fairness on Main Street? What does that really look like? Not what the promise of it is that this is what it really looks like. And that's that's what, the worst case scenario, to kind of like wrap up this worst case scenario 2 looks like, is we've got to get back to, how do you respond to the worst case scenarios? And I take people through charts of this. Here are the 10 worst case scenarios. What are you going to say or do if this thing shows up? You can't be mad. You've got to have a sentence ready to respond to it, because you've practiced it, because you can stand there and take it. And that is something that's really so valuable to do, really do that. So
all right, well,
there's more to come on this one, Tom. I mean, the way to think about this next week is, because we do have another debate coming up, is that watch. My request is for the listeners is just to watch and listen for the way that each of the candidates approach it. You'll notice that each candidate is looking to make a point, and I hope somebody really tells Biden that it's not about policy. Don't talk about policy ever again between now and the election. You can talk about what respect looks like. You can talk about what integrity looks like. You can talk about what trust looks like. This is what trust looks like to me. It doesn't look like that to him, but it looks like that to me. Here's what consistency looks like. Consistency doesn't look like that. This is mixed messages guy. I'm straight shooter guy. He's mixed messages. He looks like he's straight shooter guy, but he's really not straight shooter guy. He's mixed messages guy. Now, just even that little small narrative for Joe Biden to do, I'm this guy, he's that guy. He sounds like he's straight shooter guy, but he's really mixed messages guy. Do you want mixed messages guy for the next 4 years, or would you like straight shooter guy?
Yeah, that's a pretty good narrative that actually would play well, because there's been enough experience people have had with his mixed messages on just coronavirus alone that it's obvious to most people.
And now watch this one. He's really not flip-flop guy. We used to have a lot of flip-flop guys. Lindsey Graham is more flip-flop guy, but this guy here is a mixed messages guy. And notice he's literally saying it's important. I mean, it's not that I haven't grown or changed my narrative from 30 years ago to now. That's called maturity. He's not maturity guy. I'm maturity guy. He's the responsive guy. He's the reactive guy. Do you want the more reactive guy, or do you want the stable guy?
Wow, how brilliant would that be? In one quick statement there, Biden could take complete wind out of the sails of anybody trying to pin him on something he did in the Senate 30 years ago, like the crime bill or whatever, right?
Hey, listen, I voted for the crime bill because
on what everyone needs now, which is stability and certainty and leadership, all these things that Joe exudes.
Yeah, he could literally go step into it. It's like, hey, listen, I'll take my lumps for a decision that I made 30 years ago that I didn't have the awareness of the impact. I'll take my lumps about that and I'll own that. But I'm not going to be flip-flop guy like this guy is, that doesn't take accountability and ownership of it. All of a sudden it's like, holy shit, I'll take that leader. I'm not taking that leader. So this is a good way to stick this landing, but it's like, it's get some really strong mental preparation about what to say that's going to stick, not a policy about a plan. I mean, Hillary's third debate, everybody said she won and she talked about a plan. And in the end, people didn't care about a plan in comparison to the guy that was promising the sparkly, sizzly, shiny steak that they could take a bite out of. Of course, it wasn't there, but they still don't know it.
Right.
So that's hard that's the sadness that.
All right. Well, we need to rush this recording to the Biden debate prep team.
That's what we're talking about right there.
Okay.
All right, Tom. Well, thanks a lot for providing the support, and let's look forward to next time to see how well they did communication wise on the stage, because Trump can say and do some things to literally pivot and promise a pivot. If he gets elected, I can promise this, and we didn't get it done, but we're in the process of it. It's coming. He's already doing the it's coming thing already. It's coming. It's going to be over. The thing is coming. I have the thing. It's coming.
Oh yeah. Well, he definitely is trying to sell that the virus is, turn the corner, which it hasn't, but he's definitely trying to sell that. All right, Bill. Well, thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.